And welcome, guys. Welcome back to the second episode of Ignite Your Faith podcast. I'm Jason, and the man across the table is Alex, and we are the Bearded Christians. First of all, man, I want to recap on that first episode. If you haven't listened to it, seriously, go back. It was an amazing testimony by my dude over here, Alex. Just laid it down, and really, we've gotten amazing feedback on it. Alex, you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
I heard you gave a sermon out of that, too?
Yes, the next Sunday, the Sunday, the day, not today, because we shoot at church on Sunday as well, but last Sunday I preached, and some of the testimony was in my sermon as well.
That's awesome. Did you find inspiration from this, or did it make you, or was it just something you had already planned on doing?
The same material. So when I was preparing for this, it kept that same train of thought just within the context of a Sunday morning sermon.
Gotcha. So guys, today we're going to dive a little bit more into my testimony.
Which I'm excited about.
I don't even know why. There's some cool stuff as we get towards the end of it. But as a kid, I was just kind of a chubby kid, but I played sports like crazy, man. I loved soccer and baseball. Those are still my two favorite sports. I played soccer forever, probably 11 years worth of soccer. And then I played a couple years of baseball and a few other things. But as a kid, even though I was chubby, boy, I was athletic. Mm-hmm. And I remember, so my dad, we're going to jump right into my daddy issues. But no, my real dad was a real piece of work. He never really was much to do in my life. There was really not much of. He just never really had anything to do with me. Mm-hmm. So about 5 years old, my mom actually ended up marrying a guy that was in the Air Force. And she had to get the sign off from my biological father to be able to move me out of state because he got transferred over to California. Okay. So I moved.
Was he in the military too?
No, he was in the military.
Okay.
The guy that my mom married after.
Oh, and so she had to get signed off because you had to move to California.
Right. Gotcha, so my real father had to sign off on us going to California.
Gotcha.
And so we ended up moving to California, and we moved to Sacramento, which I loved California, except for the crazy drivers. They were, even as a young kid, I recognized when people were just being really dumb behind the wheel, mm-hmm. But still, California was amazing. It's not so great now, unfortunately. But
I think there's areas that are still. I love California. I have family in California, but yeah, I wouldn't go next to the.
I honestly loved it. I grew up in part of my life. I grew up in North Highlands, and that's where I first started playing soccer at.
So where's that at? I don't.
It's North Highlands is a county right there inside of Sacramento.
Okay.
So I can't really. It's been so long since I've been up there, but I don't know exactly. I could be oh, it's right here.
Okay. But it's up north though.
It's part of Sacramento, yeah.
Gotcha.
So you have Sacramento, which is kind of in the middle of the state, and then from there you go up north, and that's where you find San Francisco, Monterey, and so on.
Gotcha.
It's a little bit chillier up there because you're right there on the ocean.
Yeah.
But Monterey is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love being up there. But anyways, so. My mom married this guy, and we moved to California, and my brothers were born. Love my brothers to death. Shout out Jeffrey and James. California was really cool, but at the age that I was at, I was not really getting in so much as trouble with the law as I was constantly fighting kids, like other kids. I wasn't a bully, but I was one of those guys that's you don't like what I got to say? Yeah. Well, then fine, let's do it. Let's go. What do you got?
Yeah.
As I grew up, I kind of lost that mentality. But then after that, we moved to Panama. Now, that's where it was really cool, and that's where I really got myself in some trouble. The country Panama.
Oh, right on.
Down, so it's right above Brazil.
Yeah,
right before you get South America.
Yeah,
man, I had a blast down there. It was, I did so much. That's where I kissed my first girl. That's where... I really got myself in some legal trouble and threatened with deportation because, so the guy that my mom married, one night we went, I had a couple friends, and one of them wasn't the greatest person to be hanging around, but, whatever. You don't think about that kind of thing when you're a kid. And we went, and we decided we were going to have a sleepover, but we were camping outside, and they had this, big thing of bamboo. Mm-hmm. And inside of it was a circle, so it was cleared out perfectly for a tent. You could pitch a tent, no problem, and we were going to camp out. Well, there's a curfew on base, and I think for our age, it was like literally like 10 or 11 o'clock. And then for like the older teenagers, it was literally midnight. And so we bedded down for the night, got our tent put up, went to sleep. And we decided we were going to get up and roam the base. Not really intelligent, because at those point in times, you have at night and throughout the middle of the night, you literally have numerous military police, canine units and everything on foot, driving, the whole 9 yards. Obviously, it's a military base. Because Panama was, as the bases were coming to close, there's a lot of scrutiny going on. There's a lot of protesting and things for them. They wanted the Americans out, that kind of thing. It was really rough. But anyways, we decided we were going to get up. And I just happened to bring this pocket knife that was actually a switchblade that my stepdad had bought for me. And we decided, we're just going to go out and walk around and be kids. We really didn't have anything planned at that point in time. Now you go down this huge hill, and down there is what's called the Shopette. It literally had everything. There was a pizzeria in there. There's literally a convenience store, so you could do grocery shopping. They had, it was like a all-in-one, Walgreens, everything all in one. Next to that was the arcade, and then there was a barber shop next to that. And I remember on the back side of it was a set of stairs. Well, where the stairs came down, there's a spot where the roof is right next to the stairs. So it was easy to get on top of the roof. We're like, we're going to get on top of the roof, whatever. So we went on top of the roof, hung out for a little bit, and then kind of was getting bored. So we came back down, and I came up with this great idea to see what my knife could do to some of these tires on these cars that were floating around. And, so we kind of ran off. There was a car dealership not too far from us. But just on the other side of that was, it was part of the DOD service. It was literally the dependent service that worked for the military. They're contractors. And there was a couple of cars on the parking lot. So I decided to go over there and flipped open my blade and was like, guys, check this out. I went, dude, I did another tire, and then they started doing tires. By the time we got done, we had literally hit 14, 15 cars, including cars inside the dealership that were on the parking lot.
Yeah.
And we came back, and so there was the AFES is the delivery service. It was armed. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a military delivering service is what it was. They deliver the food goods and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of their big trucks just happened to be sitting out there, and I was trying as hard as I could to flatten that tire. And my knife I couldn't, it's a big tire, trying to get it through an 18-wheeler tire, and it just would not go. So I finally gave up on it, but you could still hear from all the tires across the parking lot that we had decided that we were going to sink my knife into. And so we decided to go back up on the roof and hang out, and walked over to the other side. And I remember peering down, and looking back up at me was a military police officer with his canine unit. And he was talking on his phone, and apparently he'd been watching us go back and forth from this truck to the building and trying to stab holes in it, but he didn't know what we were up to. All he knows is he was watching us go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's when he was like, just stay right there. I was like, guys, there's a cop over here. They were like, what? I'm like, there's a cop over here. And so, needless to say, they had more guys show up, more cops showed up, and they came up, had us come down off the roof, get down there, and they started asking us, how old are you? I told them I think I was like 13 at the time. And that was my first brush with the military law, right? And he kept asking me, what are you guys doing up on the roof? And we're like, well, we're just hanging out. And he's like, really? He's like, what were you doing on the roof? And I was like, man, we're just hanging out. Yeah. And he's like, do I need to go wake the base commander? I'm like, dude, we're just hanging out. And he's like, okay, let's go wake the base commander. Got up there. They started doing their little search around the top of the building. And I had taken my knife and slid it, so there was gravel up there. And I slid it under the gravel so that the gravel would cover over it and you wouldn't be able to really see it. Well, unfortunately, it had copper and bronze on it, so when they shined the light on it, it reflected back through the gravel. And they're like, oh, we found a knife. And I'm like, oh, no, dude. So I remember they hauled us into the little police station, and I sat there. It was probably 1:30 in the morning, maybe 2 o'clock, and my mom came down, and just tears in her eyes, and I'm like, man, I feel like a total butthead, and but then it was bad because on the other side of it, my one buddy Brian wasn't necessarily trying to hang me out to dry, but the other guy was like, oh, he did all of them. He ran around slashing all the tires. I was like, no, they helped. They used my knife, but they were helping. But they were kind of leaving me out to dry. That's the same, it's kids are like that. They don't want to be in trouble, but it was he did it.
Yeah.
So man, I ended up with 100 hours community service off of that. Plus, they had to make like a $400 or $500 donation to a charity fund. I really kind of got a slap on the wrist,
Yeah.
They had threatened deportation.
Yeah.
Because you're out of country, and it's really easy.
And you just caused all this damage and money.
Well,
and
not just that, but like, so they were sitting here like, basically chewing my butt, and my parents are like, "Who are you going to live with back in the States? Your whole family's here."
Yeah.
And they're like, the only thing you can do is go move back in with your grandma. That's it. I was like, oh man, I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah.
I thought I had just, run around and did something stupid and wasn't really, I didn't really think much about it.
Yeah,
but as soon as they started telling me, dude, they're ready to kick you out of the country, I'm like, oh boy, this is more serious than I thought it was.
Yeah.
So I did my community service, but here's where the other problem comes in. I was out doing my community service one day, and nothing's more embarrassing, by the way, than walking down the main drag of the base or the main road that you live around in a big, bright orange vest with a stick picking up trash. I'm telling you, don't break the law, because if you get community service, your friends are going to see you. Don't do it. Anyways, so I was walking around picking up trash, and I would go kind of just wherever. I had to serve so many hours every Sunday, blah, blah, blah. And I remember there was an empty house. So in these houses, they're all concrete built. And below that is the maid's quarters. And I never really thought about it. Didn't really consider it part of the actual house. None of that. But I was being stupid. And I went first around the corner and was like, oh, man, if I was a robber, how would I get in here? I was just being a kid, thinking this is what a robber would do. And just being, using my imagination and playing around. And so I climbed up on a trash can and opened the window. And climbed up in the window. And the lady across the street saw me and called the cops. And said, there's some guy trying to break into the maid's quarters and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up hopping down, closed the window, walked back around. The door was actually unlocked. And I walked straight in, And I'm just hanging out really maybe 2 minutes, and next thing I know, I come out around the corner and bam, there's another military police officer just sitting there. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. So they called my parents. My parents were at the time part of a motorcycle club, and they had this big weekend planned to go out to this island that we used to go to. It was a really cool island. We go out and we'd fish and spend the entire weekend. Usually it was like Memorial Day or Labor Day, where it's a 3-day weekend, and you'd be able to just kind of hang out. And this island was really cool because it was kind of scary too. You were out dead in the middle of the Panama Canal, and as you bedded down for the night, you had to be careful because caiman, which are a type of alligator
crocodiles,
they would come up on the island.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, so we would take our flashlights, like a big mag light, and shine it out there, and you'd see their eyes all reflected out in the Panama Canal. Probably the coolest thing I've ever seen, but I didn't realize how dangerous it really was.
Yeah.
But we had a good time, nonetheless. So they had plans to go out to this island, and they called my parents, and that got completely messed up. They had to come pick me up from the police station, and they're like, "What were you doing?" I was like, "Nothing." I mean, they're like, "Well, they saw you trying to climb through the window." I was like, "No, that's a lie. I didn't do that." And so I'm sitting here like, "Oh man, I completely messed this up." So I got grounded for like 3 months for that, and I think they added another 75 hours of community service on top of that 100 hours that I was already doing.
Yeah.
So needless to say, don't break the law. You end up with community service. You look stupid out there picking up trash, and your friends are going, hee, 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 hee. So that's my first run-in with the law. After that, I really never really got in trouble with the law. Okay. more times than not, it was just more of getting in trouble at school because I was a class clown.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a great story there. I was in 8th grade, still in Panama. And my social studies teacher, she's like, oh, so what did everybody do this weekend? And, dude, I'm like, oh, I raised my hand. Hey, yeah, I went to Egypt, and I went inside the pyramids. She's like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah. She's calling me on my bluff every chance that she gets. So I tell them my story, and they're like, oh, well, that's a really cool story. And she goes on to the next class. A kid several weeks later, we're doing our stuff on Egypt. And it's probably like a 2-week stint on, the little things that you do for the Egypt studies in school. And this kid raises his hand and asks teacher, and he goes, hey, can you go inside the pyramids? And the teacher just looks at me and goes, I don't know. Let's ask Jason. Jason, can you go inside the pyramids? I'm like, no, she did not. Like, she's totally calling me out right in front of all these kids. So that's always been a funny story. I still tell my wife. My wife laughs at me over that every time now. But yeah, that's about it. Like, for real.
Knowing you, I would. This is like that. Like, and also knowing your kids as well, I see it. Like I your stories, I see where they get it from. That's cool. That's cool.
So Panama was amazing. I experienced a lot down there. I never got in trouble, but we used to sneak off base, and we would go down to the beach. Off base, the drinking age was really kind of moot. It really didn't exist.
Yeah.
Because you're in a third world country, if you can walk up to the bar, you can get a beer. So we did used to sneak off the backside of the base and go down there, and it was literally like 25 cents for a 12-ounce beer, 50 cents for one of their bigger, like 24-ounce beers. Mm-hmm. Now, I still to this day do remember Sabrana was my favorite beer because it had this super sweet taste to it. Mm-hmm. And it was like the most amazing thing I'd ever tasted. I'm not going to lie. And every other beer in the world, it's still, I've often thought about ordering it because I want to see if it still tastes the way I remember it as a kid.
Yeah.
But I never have. But man, it was that beer that I was just like, man, I love that beer. That beer is amazing. But yeah, so that was, like I said, I didn't really get into too much trouble. I do remember we got away with one time. We broke into the base pool. Mm-hmm. We just climbed because it was pretty easy. Like the actual fencing that they had was concrete fencing, and you could just climb over it like it was steps, literally. And they called the cops, and we happened to get away because there was paths through the jungle and stuff that you knew how to get through and that kind of thing. Everybody knows their surroundings when it's time to get going. Yeah. And so that's what we did. Panama was a good time. I did have my first stints with the law there, but really it was more as I came back and went through high school, man. When I went my freshman year, it was really kind of sad. I didn't realize how bad I had allowed myself to go. And I'm a big guy now, but as a freshman starting high school, I was 300 pounds. Yeah. Like that's a big boy. Like, like you're talking like you about to be diabetic, you about to be, I was like, man. And I remember I hit the weights. So unfortunately, my freshman year, I only got I think you needed 3.5 credits to move on to your sophomore year. Mm-hmm. And I only got 2.5 because I slept all the time. I was, just a horrible student. And ended up, I had to go to summer school, I remember, and made that up. But then when I went to my sophomore year, I didn't even pass a class. I slept, I stayed up all the time. Mm-hmm. That was where I started smoking weed and partying and drinking. I never really did drinking and driving.
Was this still in Panama?
No. This is after I had moved back to Missouri.
Okay.
So sorry guys. Yeah, I had done moved back to Missouri. I started my freshman year right over at Seckman High School.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
But no, so I had just started kind of peddling around with substances. Mm-hmm. Nothing crazy. I didn't really do anything like coke or anything like that. It was more just weed and alcohol. I did have a party house that I would go to. It was my friend's house, and his parents, they're like, you know what, if you're going to party, do it here. Don't be out and about. So she'd take our keys, and we'd just do whatever we wanted within confines, respect. And that was really it come my sophomore year. But unfortunately, my first sophomore year, I say first for a reason, because that first year I didn't pass a single class. I slept. I'd come to school hungover, that kind of thing. And
how old were you at this time?
So
sophomore year, probably
just
15, 16?
getting ready. So I was a late bloomer because my birthday's in August.
Okay.
So I was getting closer to 17.
All right.
Probably when school had just started. So by then I was probably 17.
Okay.
As August hit. On my first year, because I remember we got back from Panama, and we went to Washington State and drove all the way back down to Missouri. And by the time we made it to Missouri, it was my 16th birthday, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And that was here in Missouri.
Gotcha.
So, but
so how did the stepdad take to all this?
I'm gonna tell you what, that dude he wore some big old rings, and I'm gonna tell you right now, nothing like tasting metal. And I don't mean to sound like a butthead, but man, I get it, because in the military, your image is everything, especially if you're raising a family. And he was in charge of running search and rescue when we were in Panama, all the way, I do believe, all the way from Alaska, all the way to the tip of Argentina.
Oh, for real?
And he was the major that ran all that. That was his job. So I know his image was quite important. And here I was running around,
slashing
tires.
getting
the base commander woken up at 1:30 in the morning. And, what was it? Oh, I got in trouble for going on the general's property. And yeah, it was ridiculous.
So then when we come back to Missouri, how does he handle the drinking and smoking, the sophomore year?
So that's where they actually, they had stayed together. He went on a job search after we moved back, and we finally got a place to stay in Missouri. We had stayed with my grandma for a little bit, and then stayed with my other grandma for a little bit, and then we finally found a house to rent. And that's where I started going to Seckman High School. And at that point, I think they were looking at getting a divorce. And this is where it kind of gets a little bit sad, because, and I don't know if I want to throw this out there, but I'm going to, because like I said, when we talked about building this podcast, I wasn't going to hold anything back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But during the divorce, it was kind of interesting. As they were married, we lived in Panama, we lived in California. Dude, I was everything to him. I was his son.
Yeah.
And then come the divorce, I was nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I just was, whatever. My brothers, which they're his biological children, I get it. They went over to, he was living in Germany, I do believe. They flew over to Germany. They were treated like family. I was treated like nothing. There was no Saturday call for me. It was to talk to them, and that was it. The last time that I remember, one of the few interactions that I had after the divorce, he showed up at the house, and I come out with no shirt on. And he goes, "Oh, you're getting a little fat there, aren't you?" And I'm like, dude, I am twice the size of you. I will hurt you. Just go on about your business, buddy.
Yeah.
He's, yay big. I'm like, dude, I'm not that little 12-year-old little boy anymore. I'm 16-year-old, and I will hurt you. And I never did, but that's how I felt inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having my first father having nothing to do with me, and then having somebody pick you up and treat you like a son,
and then
just completely disregard you and toss you to the side. Man, that totally destroyed me, especially in a point in my life where I was a teenager and I really needed a male role model.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really needed somebody to pick that up.
So how old were you when he came into the picture?
5.
And then how old were you whenever he left it?
I was about still 16-ish.
Okay.
It was before I went into my sophomore year. Sorry, guys, I got ahead of it a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, it was in that whole transition phase where you're becoming a teenager, you're growing into manhood.
Okay.
You really needed a man.
So then, after the divorce, what was life like for you? Like,
so the great thing is, after the divorce, the man that I call my dad now came into the picture.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's the man. I love that man to death. He's always been there for me. He has never dropped the ball. I mean, if I'm broke down on the side of the road, it's 2:30 in the morning, I'm 500 miles away, he's on his way. He's that kind of dad.
How long did it take? So when he first came into the picture, how did you treat him? How was the relationship?
Me and him got along just fine. There was never really any animosity between us.
Okay.
And I think that's because I was looking for somebody to be in my life, and and I didn't. the great thing was he never approached me as being an authority figure or a father. He was just my friend.
Yeah, I got you.
And I feel like that's important because I think people have a tendency to put pressure on a relationship at those ages. Like when I'm 16 and you know, he's an adult, I'm, oh, well, guess what? I'm this and this. He never came at me that way. It was just, hey, how are you? And it became close real quick.
Yeah.
And
there's some. Sorry.
Edit.
Yeah. No, probably not. We'll keep it in there. It's funny. There's some young men that I've worked with, and that's what I do. I don't. I'm just here to be like a big brother or like a friend, like a mentor. And they're like, they don't have fathers or they've come from some tough situations, and that builds the relationship so much faster.
Right.
Because I'm not coming into it as the expert. I'm just coming in here just to spend some time as a role model and just do some cool stuff with you, right? Like that's it.
Yeah.
And then through that, you know, we end up talking and building relationships, and they end up hopefully growing closer to God and getting through whatever they're going through at the time. With him, the reason that I asked the question is because sometimes when you had the first one, trust is broke. Second one, trust is broke. How quick did you trust this one?
It wasn't long.
Well, good.
It really wasn't. Like I said, he always approached me more as friend, and to this day, he tells me I'm his best friend. You know, so we have a very close relationship.
Cool.
I love him to death. He's an amazing person, and has, like I said, always been there for me. I can't really say anything negative about him. But so that's where that went through, and then like I said, I didn't pass a single class that year as a sophomore. Had to do a second sophomore year. So I was on the 5-year plan, not the 4-year plan. But I ultimately did end up graduating. And my first job, I was working at Hardee's, and then got tired. So I got fired from there, and I will not go into why I got fired from there. But then I went to Walmart and started working there. And then got really tired of doing Walmart. And so I moved on to a company that my cousin was working for. He worked for this company doing what I pretty much do now, which is metal, stone, and wood restoration. I kind of got tired of that job. There was also a little bit of politics in there, but, you know, ultimately I wanted to find my own path.
Yeah.
You know, when people... Sometimes you feel less successful when people try to give you things or do things for you. So I felt like I needed to step out and go find my own path. So I went to work for the competitor. And I worked with them for about 3 years. Stuart Dean was literally, I don't know if you're going to have to edit that one out. Anyways, the company that I was working for is where I met my wife, Vanessa. You know Vanessa. And it was there that we got married, and I adopted the 3 oldest children. So our 20-year-old and Gracie and Samuel. Caleb's the oldest one. He's 20. And then we ended up having our 2, Timothy and Leona. And so Leona came after I'd gone to Mid-America Metals. Man, you're going to have to edit that one out too. So I went to work for them, and then got tired of working nights, and moved on to Marble Life. I have permission to drop that name. Okay. So you don't have to edit that one. But anyways, but back when I was working the other 2 jobs, and it was mainly that 3-year stint that I was working at the competitor, that's where I started trying to find something to fill a void, because I was working nights all the time. So my family would walk in the door from work, and I would walk out the door and go to work. So I would get home 2-3 o'clock in the morning, not really have anything to do. At this point, the Michael Brown shooting had happened. Remember that?
Yeah.
So this is where I started becoming a social justice warrior. This is where I had actually gotten involved in planning protests and things like that. Like I said, I was trying to fill a void. I was trying to become useful in some way, shape, or form. I met a bunch of people online. I won't drop names or groups or anything like that. But this is what we did. We planned protests. I helped plan another protest against, I don't know if I want to say their name, Child Protective Services. Because the research that I've always done is to me, they're human traffickers. I don't there's people within the system that I can trust, or that maybe I should trust, but the system itself, I do not trust. To me, they're always out to literally go for the highest bid for each child, and that's disgusting to me. Same thing with foster care. Foster care is not what it's all cracked up to be, but everybody's like, oh, foster care. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. A lot of these kids are abused in foster homes. You hear it all the time on the news, all the time. But that became, I don't know why, but that became the most important focus to me was kids. And that ultimately led me to finding other groups. These groups were specifically designed to hunt down pedophiles. So what they would do is create an online profile that, you know, kind of hinted at being a young age teenage girl is typically what you wanted to aim for. And man, I'm telling you what, it was so disgusting. So I got in touch with the group, and I won't drop their name either. And guy I took to, me and him were fantastic friends, you know, online friends. Dude was from England, you know, so we never really got to meet. We had talked about it. He talked about coming across the pond and, you know, us meeting up. But he trained me fantastic. Like, he did a great job letting me helping me understand all the exact rules that go into it, the legalities, what can cause your case to be thrown out if it ever goes to court, that kind of thing. And like I said, me and him became super, super close. But yeah, so he taught me how to set up a decoy account. And I don't know if you've ever heard of these. Some people still do it today. And basically you just want to carry on the persona of, you know, a 14-year-old girl. And then the specifics behind it was like, you can't lead them on, you know, as they're trying to talk to you in some form of coercion, trying to get you to send pictures and things like that. Basically what you are supposed to continue to say is like, oh, I'm only 14. I don't know what that means. That kind of thing. That way you're drawing away from the situations. They're trying to pull you into the situation. That way, if it goes to court, all that evidence goes literally to the FBI, and the FBI brings it into court, and there's no showing of you leading them on. If you're leading them on, your case can be thrown out like that. So I had one profile that I had up for probably a year. And this guy from Denmark, it was really disgusting. Anyways, I'm on my account, and this dude I hadn't even talked to him yet. And it's really disgusting. Like, he just instantly started sending pictures. And we're talking about not just, you know, a click here and a click there and a shot of that. Like, he was sending some very disgusting, disturbing, provocative, nasty pictures. And I was talking to the guy, and I had to respond to him. Otherwise, he'd leave, and then we'd lose his IP address. We'd never be able to track him down, figure out who he was. And so I gathered all this information. I started talking to him. He started talking, you know, dirty. And I started telling him, dude, I'm only a 14-year-old girl. I don't know what you're talking about. He would ask me things like, oh, do you like to hold hands? And it would go progressively more disgusting than that. And finally, once he had sent those pictures over, man, I had them. Like, instantly, as soon as those pictures come through, you've got them on the hook. And I remember, man, I PDF'd everything, and I sent it to my informant. And the informant, they literally were in touch. They had their own people that... So it was like I handed off my information, they handed off their information, and that information went to somebody in the FBI. And then at that point in time is when they would come back and start investigating, going through all the information, and then on top of that, they would try to lure him in on their own accounts. You could also lose your account. I've had my account swiped from me like that before. But from my understanding, the guy basically disappeared off the face of the earth. And when we tracked his IP address was coming from Denmark, I want to say it was. And
But could that have been rerouted to somewhere else?
It can. It very easily can. There's a way through all that. That you can get around, like VPNs and things like that. I don't know nothing about that.
So what pulled you into this specific area of
Because, so I went from literally protesting and being involved with, like I said, social justice warriors. But for some reason, I don't know why I was drawn to dealing with pedophiles. You know, there was I never exchanged any nasty porn or anything like that. Yeah. But it was literally setting up a decoy so that these people that are disgusting and online predators would do what they do, and then bam, you would have them, and then you ship that information off, and then it was so. I don't know what really caused it. I just know I fell in line with a bunch of guys that they handled that kind of thing. Now, the one most important aspect of all that, the guy told me, he's like, you have to be careful who you trust in your ring, in your informants, your hunters, the whole 9 yards. He's like, because there are pedophile hunters that will extort the subject for things like Bitcoin. So this is when Bitcoin was just starting to come out and become important, and it was actually growing. But at that point in time, it was just the digital currency. It was very small. Nobody really knew much about it. But they would use that to extort the subject and then, turn around and let them go.
You know, this is something kind of as you're talking about this, there's a ministry that we are affiliated with called CERT Ministry. I forget what it stands for. But they
Human trafficking. I know because I donated to them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I bought their shirts.
All right, so they do.
Human trafficking is very important to me, and I think a lot of that comes back from. I'm still part of an organization, United Bikers for Unjust Causes and Tragedies. Through all this social justice warrior stuff is where I met my buddy Phil. He ran a 501c3 organization that was based around human trafficking. Yeah. So human trafficking is very important to me.
Well, that's and they do the same sort of thing where they'll talk to them online and the whole that. So that is something to look into. I've got a couple questions now. Do you mind? Are you at so? Actually, so you get to the social war, your stuff. All of this is going on. What takes place between this and salvation?
So, as I'm a social justice warrior and doing the pedo hunting, salvation comes in because my wife is. Well, let me pause. Let me go back. Not only am I into hunting down pedophiles, I'm also into a bunch of conspiracy theories.
Okay. Yeah, I remember
and this is where it takes a dark turn. So everything from pedo hunting, which is very disgusting, it's constant bombardment with just nasty images, to going down conspiracy theories and rabbit holes that just lead to other pedophilic subjects, things like Pizzagate.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which I investigated that very thoroughly. As soon as Podesta's emails came out, and I was so the guy had been doing pedophile hunting for years. And it was very thorough, knew exactly what he was talking about, and was able to explain to me before I even realized what the FBI was talking about, what could give me, these are symbols that you'll find within their emails, they flash it in front of your face. I mean, just like everybody says with the Illuminati and covering your eye and stuff. Yeah. Oh, I'm not part of the Illuminati. And stuff like that. But they do put the symbology right in your face. And it's like sigil magic. It's kind of basically what it is. But that really started hitting me with major depression. There was just so much darkness that I was surrounding myself with. And to this day, I still feel like a lot of these conspiracy theories are legit. Pizzagate, I do feel, is legit because the rich, the elite, they have all this money, they've done everything, and why not tap into the taboo? Because that's what rich people do. That's what these people that can do whatever they want to do because they have power, they have money, they can get away with it. That's what they do. I knew about Jeffrey Epstein before Jeffrey Epstein hung himself. Okay, I'm going to just put it to you that way. I knew about Ghislaine Maxwell, Ghislaine, however you pronounce her name, and I knew about, when Podesta's emails came out, that's when everything was coming out about Hillary Clinton and her organization, and that being a front for human trafficking. Laura Silsby in Haiti, when the hurricane hit Haiti, or was it the earthquake?
I'm not for sure.
Back in 2004. Remember 2006, something like that?
Was it a hurricane?
I can't remember if it was a hurricane or if it was an earthquake.
Okay, I'm not for sure.
But the Clinton Foundation went down there, and this lady named Laura Silsby, who now heads up the Amber Alert, was caught twice smuggling kids out of Haiti, which is human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And the Clinton Foundation was involved in that. Actually, Bill Clinton, I do believe, went down there to flex his political muscle to help her get out of trouble.
Yeah.
So all this information was coming my way, and a lot of people don't know about this kind of stuff. Yeah. And, if you read some newspaper articles, you'll come across some of it from time to time, but it's just like most people don't catch it. They don't realize what's going on. But this lady, Laura Silsby, was caught up, now heads up the Amber Alert network that issues the Amber Alerts. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so stuff like that was the scary part, because I realized, even though people want to call it a conspiracy theory, which the term was coined after JFK was killed to make you look like you're a nut, even though they called it a conspiracy theory, I knew better. I knew that no matter what, I've seen enough evidence to know that a lot of this stuff is legit, and that in the balance of it all, there's good, there's evil. Well, on one side, actually, one guy asked me one time, I said, dude, I don't believe in the devil, but I believe in our creator. He's like, well, if you don't believe in the devil, then why are you doing this? And I'm like, dude, that's a good point. Like, seriously, like, these people are all embedded in satanic rituals and things like that. And why am I even involved if I don't believe in the devil and Satan and that kind of stuff? Yeah. So he made a perfectly good point. And then I came across this video this lady had on TikTok. And she asked a fantastic question. She goes, why are most Christians, or why is it that most conspiracy theorists are Christians and right-wing conservatives? And she's like, and I'm just sitting there for her to come up with her answer. And she goes, it's because we're trained to see an enemy that most people don't even believe in anymore. Yeah. And I was like, oh, dude. I was like, you are so absolutely right on that. I was like, man, you hit the nail on the head with that. But it was ultimately going down these paths of conspiracy theories and pedo hunting and being bombarded with disgusting images and things like that that I feel left me in a very vulnerable state that led to massive depression. So my wife had been trying to get me into church for a long time, kicking and screaming if it had to be. She was going to drag me by my ear and like, get in here. But the one time that I needed to have a prayer answered, it was answered, and it was like that. And it was really interesting because we lived in this horrible house over in High Ridge, and I hadn't been saved yet, but by the time I got saved and the time that I had asked God for a new house that I could be proud of, that I could take my family to, that we could call our own home and not be crammed and just have this thing falling, a decrepit house falling apart around you, literally, because I had no credit score. I had no means of funds or anything. I just was like stuck, and I hated that. It really made me feel very unsuccessful, very bad about myself, my own personal well-being, my children's well-being. But I remember being up at the altar, and we were just praising God. That was it. And then that's when I turned to like, God, please, man, I gotta get a house. My family deserves it. We deserve it, and I remember I had worked on my credit score a little bit just before that, and I was like, I'm just going to take a shot in the dark. So I submitted my credit score to Rocket Mortgage, and they denied me. But what was crazy was, out of nowhere, this lady, and shout out to Mona Pritchett, you're amazing, hits me up, right? She's a realtor. And she's like, has Rocket Mortgage gotten back to you with their whole spiel with, if you've been approved or not? I was like, I honestly have not heard from anybody. I was like, you're the first person I've heard from. And she's like, okay. She's like, well, if that falls through, I've got my own people. Give me a call and we'll figure something out. I was like, okay, it's interesting. I've never had that happen to me before. Yeah. And so I turn around and get my email from Rocket Mortgage and denied. I was like, okay. So I called her back, and she's like, well, I'm going to put you in touch with my guy. So she put me in touch with, what is that dude's name? I want to say it was Dan. Corey is his name. I believe it was USA Mortgage. Man, I think we're going to get sued on this episode. But anyway, got in touch with him, and we started the pre-approval process. And a couple days later, I get the email back, and he's like, well, you've been pre-approved for this amount. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, no, you're pre-approved for, up to blah, blah, blah. And so he's like, so I'm going to send a letter over to Mona, and you guys can start looking at houses. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? No way.
Yeah.
And I was running to tell my wife, and I was just like so excited. But then, dude, literally within a couple months after that, I think it was October that we started looking for houses. By February, we were closed, and boom, had our own house.
Right on.
And that was all that I had prayed for from God. I mean, I had focused and prayed, like, come on, God, come on.
Yeah.
And just like that, bam, step after step after step fell in place. And like, I was like, dude, this is awesome.
So it was his goodness that led to repentance.
It really was. And then I turned around, and I believe I got saved like directly after that. It wasn't the following year. I got saved after I got good news that I had been pre-approved. So that's when I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what ultimately led me to salvation. Now, I still go through stints of depression. I still have days where everything's not the greatest, and but ultimately I turn to him, and literally, boom, you start to praise the man, and
things happen.
I wouldn't even say things happen. It instantly changes that inner psyche, that inner feeling about yourself, and you start to understand, or you just start to kind of change and blossom, and you just start. Pastor said it great today. Like, you plant that seed, you can walk away from that seed, but the enemy's right there behind it to come in and
exactly.
snatch it up. But no, and that's the sad thing, honestly, is the inspiration for this podcast is the fact that people have gone through that, and I've watched it happen. We went on that missions trip, and then somebody got saved, and we set them free, and boom, they just went cold. And I feel like it was our fault. We set them free in this crazy world without, like Pastor said, coming back to check on them and coming back to continually guide them until they're at that point where they can battle and do the spiritual battle on their own. And instead, we kind of left them fall on his face. I felt the same way when I first got saved. When I first got saved, I was like, woo, I'm saved. It's great. It's awesome. But then you do hit moments of spiritual battle.
Absolutely.
You do hit, and if you're not prepared, man, I don't know how many times I have fallen flat on my face in the middle of a spiritual warfare. Bam!
Yeah.
But I'm much stronger now in my faith. This is why this podcast was so important to me, because I feel like there's people out there that go through that same exact experience, and in order to lead them home, we got to have some kind of way of getting a hold of them.
Absolutely.
So, bam! So get out there and listen to it. Don't just pass it by. Don't scroll.
So there's one thing that I want to ask real quick. So it's so just bear with me for just a second. So you're young, your father, your biological father isn't in the picture. The next man is in the picture for quite a while, but then just kicks you to the curb, and it's like you don't exist anymore. Then you have the next man who has been a good man. He's been a friend, and the reason that you probably came through this stuff rather well is because of that positive influence, right?
I would say that's a fair way to put it, yeah.
Okay. So then from there, you get into some trouble in high school, and then from there you start with Social Warrior Protest.
It was actually after
Michael Brown.
Yeah, so that's where I became Social Justice Warrior. That's out of high school. That's after I become an adult, and I'm working for, I want to say it was right after me and Vanessa got married.
Okay, all right.
So that's when Michael Brown. You'll have to look at the date to exactly know when.
I had just gotten out of prison, so it was 2014 probably. 2014, 2015 is when Michael Brown happened.
Okay, so yeah, me and my wife were together.
'Cause I was just out of prison not long after that. Not right before that happened. Not long after I was out of prison. So okay. So then the social warrior. Then this is what I want you to see. You're talking about depression happened.
Right.
The pathway to depression started a long time ago, because you had referred to how looking at all those negative images, it seemed like took you into this. To me, and I just tell me if this seems correct. You have the social warrior protest gives you a purpose, which depression is linked to not having a purpose, right?
Right.
Okay. So you don't have a purpose, so then you find one in the social warrior stuff. Then from there, you see a rise in this rise from first the social warrior stuff, then to the hunting the pedophiles, and then conspiracy theories, and you see this trajectory, right?
Like a pattern.
Exactly.
Right.
So the trajectory is a lot of times with depression, we exist at this baseline that's really, really low, right? And so we're going through life, and high-risk behaviors are the same sort of thing, but we need a purpose, or we need something to get involved in to feel alive, right? To increase arousal, right?
Yeah.
So as you're looking at the social warrior thing made you feel alive, but after a while, that's just not, I need something a little bit. Then you got the pedophile hunting, right?
Right.
And then you got more, and you see this gradual increase because of the void that you're trying to fill. Then that void is maximized because you know how you said you didn't have the house that you were trying to do, the house, your
Right.
family, you didn't feel worth, all this value. So you have this pathway from a child of disregarded by one means I have no value. I thought I had value of the second one, then disregarded again.
Right.
So you have this depressive baseline starts at childhood, and then it just keeps going up and up and up. The weed, the drinking are all coping mechanisms to suppress what started. Because you said he was there for like the first 5 years is when you're by, so that years 1 through 4 are hugely imprinted, right? So you have this imprinted of the lack of father from them. Then into high school, you begin to suppress them with the drugs and the drinking, partying. The aggressive behavior they like to fight that you were talking about.
That was as a kid. That was, I don't even know. So a lot of times it was just more of an argument. But yeah, so he was with my mom for about 10 years.
Okay.
But yes, I agree with where you're going with all the coping mechanisms.
It's
and the
all
pattern.
rising.
Right.
It's all rising. But it didn't stop until God came into the picture, right?
Right.
Right? So all of the void, right? So depression happens, we don't feel alive, right? And a lot of times we don't feel alive because of the trauma that we've had in life, right? So all of this stuff happens, we don't feel alive, so then we start doing things just to feel like this life is worth living. Like, why live? Like, I'd rather be drunk. I'll be real honest. I'd rather be drunk, be high, than have a life without purpose, right? Because why? There's no use to living with no purpose, right? So you're trying to find your purpose in all of these different things, but the void is never filled until God comes into the picture. The void, I guess we can ask this. The void that you were trying to fill through all of this stuff, what is it about God that filled it? Is it the lack of the Father from the childhood that did he feel? Was it that finally gave a balance to you?
I would say yes to in an extent, but I would also say that it made me understand myself a little bit more, and it made me realize that I wasn't that pathetic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was more inner workings. So it was definitely not just an instantaneous change.
Yeah.
I've noticed it over several months to a year of God making moves inside me and in my life that made me feel progressively stronger, progressively more successful, and more reliant on Him. And in fact, my faith has also grown out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So inside, the changes that have been made took, several months, especially any big changes where I would find myself just constantly beating myself up. And that's one of the biggest things is at work, beating myself up. I'm not nearly as bad at that anymore. But it is one of those things that I'm like, oh, the customer's going to come in here and they're going to hate it. They're not going to like it. They're just going to say, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And not realizing that sometimes you have to step back and say, man, I did the best that I could. This is the best I can get it. I'm sorry. There's nothing else I could really do for you. And I started realizing that there was, instead of beating myself up, there was an understanding that, hey, you've given everything you've got.
The father that was in the military, is he more critical of your words? With his words, like
super.
Okay.
Super.
Was anything you did ever good enough?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he told me he was proud of me, that kind of thing.
Like,
but yes, he is a super critical person.
Okay, so like, do you feel like things had to be exact in order to win his approval?
It's kind of hard to say because at that age, I don't think I was really looking for approval at that point because I had already accepted. I had been accepted. There was really not much of that kind of an issue between me and him that I can think of.
Maybe not. Let me just cut to the chase. The reason that I'm asking, if there's a sense of self-critical, right? Of the customer's not going to do this, I'm sorry, he's not. They're not going to. I wonder, and when you say that the reason I asked him specifically because those are very important years, right? If like when you're cleaning your room or something, or if you had to do this and he came in, was it good enough, right? And the things that he's critical over, sometimes that can instill in us a deep feeling of nothing. It's not good enough. Oh, they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it. They're not going to go. Right. And so it's because, and so that's what I was just. That's why I asked if.
No, I don't think so. I don't. Like I said, I don't think there was really much of an approval issue or having to seek out his affection or his approval. I just feel like sometimes he was just a butthead. Literally. Okay, and I'm not trying to be mean. Everybody's got their moments. I know I can be a butthead, and but
I just wonder if that, because when I asked you, is he critical? It was very instant. Oh yes, of course, right?
He's super. Super.
So I'm wondering, because of that criticalness during those years, what effect it has on.
So in those instances, it was more of. So being critical, he would pick and choose.
Okay.
Who he did that to, and it was like certain things would set him off, and then he would be critical of that component.
Gotcha.
And then that child would be the one that would be dealing with the issue. Too much, I don't really feel like he did that to me very much.
All right.
There were probably moments that I don't remember.
How about your mom?
So my mom was never like that. My mom was
super laid back, and
for the most part, she definitely had moments which parents do. They get a little frustrated, But other than that, like my mom's always been a fantastic mom. Okay. I think every kid feels that way about their mom. Like mom is number one. That's just the way.
No, not mine. Because I was just curious about that part, but the pathway from childhood up, and then the finding purpose in the different issues all links to coping mechanisms for the depression. Right. And so then whenever it would be the normal path to then that person, your story, you as a person, then saturating themselves with the negative images and the negative environment could absolutely even maximize the depression. Right. Absolutely. But I love how, I didn't know you beforehand, but the hole that Jesus has filled. That's where I don't, even from when you first came here to now, it feels like you're more full. Right? Does that make sense?
It does. Well, and I'm going to tell you right now because, and I don't mean to cut you off, but it is so. Oh man, where was I going with this? Even I've noticed that at the beginning, and this is where I've said I've grown in my faith. when we had the class with it was David. He did the Growing Your Faith class.
Yeah.
From that point, even forward, at that point, I still was, I was like, yeah, Jesus, but I didn't really have the faith. Like, I was just kind of like, all right, I'm going to step out here just a little bit and see what the waters are like. But till now, it's like, I give glory to God and I praise him. And it's like, he has just worked miracles on me. I feel so much better about who I am. And yes, like you said, I'm much fuller. Yeah. And I enjoy things a lot more. I can still be a little bit of a nag, I guess. But no matter what, I felt myself grow. And I think that's most important because that allows you to continue to grow instead of questioning your faith. You continue to grow in faith by knowing that you've step by step have blossomed. Exactly. So
that's one more question, and then we can wrap.
You're probably already in trouble.
Yeah, I know. So here's the question: in 1 minute or less, can you sum up the person you were before Jesus to the person you are now?
Oh, absolutely. But as back before I got saved, completely depression states would hit me like that, just out of nowhere, and very quickly and very often. At this point now, I'm no longer, if I hit a spot that's depression, it's caused by something. It's not just automatically came out of nowhere or you can't figure out why you're just depressed. I still get my depression episodes, but not nearly as much. And that has made the biggest impact in my life. It's allowed me to, it's lifted some weight off of me. So as the person that I am now, I'm definitely walking in faith more than I ever have before. And at this point in time, I can honestly say that I have faith in my God, and I have faith that no matter what, Jesus is right there beside me. Absolutely. And he's going to take care of business. So.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
So that's probably the most important thing to get out of all of this. I know I've kind of jumped here, jumped there, rambled here, rambled there.
It was good.
But the most important fact is I want you guys to understand that he's got your back, man. Just put your faith in him. Take it to the foot of the cross and put it all out there and let him handle it. And you'll be surprised at what you're going to get. So.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Are we ready to wrap this up, guys? We're like big time late. I'm getting Alex in trouble over here.
It's all right.
So other than that, guys, man, thanks for listening. Again, thank you for listening to episode 1. Hopefully this one knocks your socks off too. Other than that, guys, when are we dropping our next episode? We're going to start doing one a week now?
Yeah.
No? Uh-oh.
Maybe. Uh-oh. We're going to start. We're going to start to Wednesdays first.
So Sundays to Wednesdays.
Yes, okay. We are going to start once a week very, very soon.
Okay. So from here on out, we're going to start recording an episode. It's still going to be every 2 weeks. We're going to record our episode on Sunday, drop it on Wednesdays. It just gives us a little bit more time to deal with it. Guys, check us out. Spotify. Also, iHeartRadio app, Pandora. You can find us on Stitcher as well.
YouTube, subscribe, like. That's how we go up in all the lists. So like us.
And we're also on TikTok. In case you guys haven't seen them little reels going around, especially the one I talk about my head looking like a watermelon. Other than that, guys, stay fresh. We love you. And peace out. You guys have a good one.